Välkomna! Och välkomna till fortsättningen på den fina Aktiekvällen i Göteborg den 2 mars. Vi har haft ett antal väldigt spännande företagsgenomgångar och vi ska fortsätta med det. Och nu ska vi titta på Saniona som ett av de där danska väldigt framgångsrika läkemedelsföretagen eller motsvarande som finns noterade på den svenska aktiemarknaden. Och den som ska presentera det här för oss heter Rami Levin. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. He took the words right out of my mouth. So I apologize. I guess I'm the only one speaking English today, so I have to apologize in advance. But I do have to say that this conference is perfect timing because actually, as a rare disease company, just 2 days ago was Rare Disease Day, celebrated all over the world with the intent to really raise awareness to rare diseases. So I think this is a perfect timing to talk about Saniona and, Saniona as a rare disease company and the product and indications that we are looking at. So my name is Rami Levin. I joined Saniona just 2 months ago, but I have been in the pharmaceutical industry and biotech for over 24 years. My most recent role, I was the president of North America at Sobi. Sobi, I'm sure you are all familiar with. So I basically built the organization in North America. And I joined Saniona in early January. So let's talk a bit about Saniona and who we are. Saniona is a rare disease company. We're in a clinical stage of development. We have one asset, which is our most advanced asset, called Tesomet, which we are pursuing in 2 rare disease indications. The first indication, which is called Prader-Willi syndrome, which I will talk a bit in a second, and the second rare disease indication is called Hypothalamic Obesity. You can find quite a few companies in the Boston area, which is where I am from, that have mid to late stage development products. What you can't find a lot, and that's what is unique about Saniona, is the combination of both a mid-late stage development coupled with an early research platform that will fuel future indications into our portfolio. We have 2 examples of that. One is SAN 711, which we are pursuing for rare itching disorders. And the other one is SAN 903, which we are pursuing in rare inflammatory disorders. The SAN 711 is about to enter phase 1, and the SAN 903 is in preclinical. So just to talk about the completeness, but of course what I will primarily focus on today is Tesomet for the 2 rare indications that we are pursuing. As we decided as a company to become a rare disease company, of course it's not just to decide we're going to be a rare disease company, it has strategic implications in everything that we do. One of the things that that has is, as part of our research, molecules that we identify that will potentially be treatments for rare diseases, we have the full intention to develop ourselves and ultimately commercialize ourselves. But if we ultimately find molecules that are more suitable for big markets, then we don't intend to develop those ourselves. We intend to partner or out-license those products to other companies. What that means that in the longer run, we will have 2 streams of revenue. One is our proprietary products that we develop and commercialize ourselves, and the other stream of revenue will be from milestone payments and royalties of the products that we out-license to other companies. And last but not least, just to talk a bit about our current leadership. We have currently 3 leaders in our executive leadership team. I'm the new CEO. We have Jürgen, who was the CEO before, sitting here, who's now the Chief Scientific Officer, and we have Thomas, who is our CFO. You may have seen a press release recently, but Thomas will be leaving, and we will be hiring a CFO in the US. Because one of the things that Saniona is doing is actually refocusing our efforts in the US market. That is the biggest biotech market in the world. That's where all our clinical trials will take place. That's where the big financing can take place. That's where it is the biggest market in rare diseases, and it's important for me to be there and for the leadership team to be there as we start progressing with our development. As a leadership team today, we have over 80 years of experience, and we will be adding to that a new chief medical officer in the US, and as I said, a new CFO as well. So let's talk about our first rare disease indication that we're pursuing. The indication is called Prader-Willi. It's a rare disease, and in the US, a rare disease is referred to as any disease that has less than 200,000 patients is considered a rare disease. And you can see here in the US, there are only 8,000 patients. So this is a relatively small rare disease. About 13,000 in Europe and about 3,300 in Japan. This is a genetic disease, and the main characteristics, I would say, are two. One is what we call hyperphagia. Hyperphagia is this constant desire to eat, constantly. There's no switch, I'm full, I'm hungry, I'm full. They're constantly hungry. They always eat. That is probably the biggest burden on the families, because what this means is these kids and then adolescents and then adults will go around, will take food out of the garbage, will pick up food from the floor. The parents have to lock the cupboards, have to lock the refrigerator so that the kids don't constantly eat. The mortality is relatively high. Expectancy is around 30 to 40 years old, and most of the reasons these patients die are related to their constant eating, and that could be either they choke from food and die, or they eat so much that their internal organs explode and they die. So this is a very devastating disease, and once you meet a patient, and even more when you meet a parent and you hear their stories, it really, I think, encourages us for sure to bring this product to the market. It's important to say that these patients, before I move forward, these patients are not your normal patients. They have a very low muscle tone, very low bone density. Really, all they have is fat, just a lot of fat. So they're not mobile, they don't walk around, they have mental issues, they have behavior outbursts, anger issues, etc. So the drug that we are developing is called Tesomet, and Tesomet acts exactly on the three areas that cause a Prader-Willi syndrome. So if you think of the disease, what actually happens in the disease, these patients have an increase in craving for food. They constantly want to eat. They have an increase in appetite. And on the flip side, they have a decrease in the metabolic fat burn. So not only are they not burning fat, but they constantly eat it, so they become obese. What Tesomet is basically a triple monoamine reuptake inhibitor. And by increasing the dopamine, the serotonin, and the noradrenaline, it actually acts to reduce all the issues that we see with Prader-Willi. So it basically reduces the craving for food, or hyperphagia, and I'll show you the results in a second. It reduces the appetite, and it increases the fat burn. So what we see is the decrease in that desire to eat, and as a result of the fat burn, a decrease in weight as well. So what we have conducted so far is a phase 2A proof of concept study. I'm not going to go into too much detail around the study design, but we had a 3-month study in adults, and we looked at one dose. Then we had another study in adolescents. We reviewed the results. We did another study in adolescents. We opened that into an open label phase, so we basically allowed all the placebo patients to get on treatment, and then we increased the dose in the second phase. So this is 3 months, 3 months, 3 months, and 3 months of treatment. And as a proof of concept, what it really is intended to do is to give us confidence, one, that the drug is effective, and number two, that the drug is safe, so we can continue with the clinical development of the product. And what we saw, and you can see the results here behind me. So here on the left, you can see the adult. The purple is the placebo group, and the light blue is Tesomet, and you can see that hyperphagia, that desire to constantly eat, goes down in the treatment group at the end of the 3 months down to 0. And speaking to physicians, this is unheard of. Anything below 5 is a huge reduction, but to go down to 0, that's basically normal. So that was a huge important result. We then went into the adolescent. In the adolescent group, again, the first part of the study was a placebo-controlled study. We reduced the dose by 4, and what you can see is we probably reduced it too much because there wasn't a lot of difference between the placebo group and the treatment group. But in the next 3 months, which was the open label, we offered all the placebo groups to go on treatment, and you could start seeing the decline in hyperphagia. And then here we increased the dose to 0.25, and you can see the substantial decline after that. And at the end of the 9 months treatment, as I said, they were below 5, and anything below 5 is actually quite significant. The same token, we looked at weight reduction. And on the left is what you see here for the adults, equivalent to the substantial results we saw in hyperphagia. We could see it on weight loss reduction. See 5.6% reduction in weight loss in the adults. When we went into the placebo-controlled phase with the adolescents, the dose was too low, so there was no difference in hyperphagia, and there's no difference here in the weight loss. But when we went to the open label 2, where we increased the dose, and you can see quite substantial, minus 2.6%. Now, it's important to say these patients, they're adolescents, so they grow anyway. Without treatment, they will increase weight. So in fact, 2.6% over a 3-month period, whereas without treatment, they would increase in weight. This is quite a substantial reduction. And I know this is a complicated slide, so I'm not going to go too much into it, but I would probably just focus on this. So one of the things that we look at is the level of tesomet in the blood. And what we try and target is to try and get to a level of around at least 6, 7, or 8, around here, because what we could see is that there's an incredible correlation between the reduction in weight loss and the level of tesomet in the blood. And here you can see it. So this is 0 on weight loss. So anything above this line is actually a weight increase. Anything below this line is a weight decrease. So what you can see here is that when the level of tesomet in the blood was above 6, 7, or 8, the patient started to lose weight. What that means for treatment is we need to make sure that when we treat the patients, we need to make sure we get to those plasma levels, because we know that once we get to those plasma levels, we will see a weight reduction. Okay? So that data convinced us that the drug works. The drug works and is safe at the doses that we wanted to pursue. So then we went ahead to design our phase 2b, and this is where we are right now. So we intend to meet with the FDA in the first half of this year to discuss not only the results, but discuss our future development, primarily this phase 2b. This is a very robust trial. In the previous trial, there were 18 patients, 9 adults and 9 adolescents. Here we're talking about 150 patients in this study across 3 treatment arms and placebo for a 16-week period. That 16-week period will be sufficient to then go and speak to the FDA to talk about a phase 3 and registration. But we will still continue with the trial into an open label phase. What that will allow us is to get data on what happens in clinical practice later on once the drug is approved if you increase from a lower dose to a higher dose, or what happens if you de-escalate from a higher dose to a lower dose. That will be very useful once the drug is approved for giving data to the physicians on how to treat. So a very robust clinical trial. So that's Prader-Willi syndrome. And that's, at least for now, the more advanced in our development, just ever so slightly. The second indication we are looking at is hypothalamic obesity. Hypothalamic obesity, unlike Prader-Willi, is not a genetic disease. Hypothalamic obesity is usually a result of an injury to the brain. So imagine a normal person who's healthy, may have a tumor or a tumor removed from the brain. As a result of that, removal causes an injury to the hypothalamus, and that injury creates symptoms that are similar to what we see in Prader-Willi, in the sense that they become obese, they can't stop They don't feel full. They constantly eat and become obese in a very short period of time. The difference is, unlike Prader-Willi, where we talked about, the muscle tone, the bone density is not like a normal obese patient. In this case, in hypothalamic obesity, it is like a normal patient. And as I said, this is a slightly smaller indication. You can see here in the US, between 3,400 and 6,800. In Europe, slightly more, between 5,500 and 11,000. And Japan, obviously, is much smaller. And obviously, one of the one of the characteristics of this disease, these patients were normal patients, so there's a lot of depression, because they always remember how it was before and how it is right now. So there's depression that could lead to suicide. In this case, we have a clinical trial running right now, a phase 2 study. We anticipate the results later towards middle Q2. And this was a 24-week study, 21 patients. Obviously, it's still in the middle of the blinded phase, so we don't have the results. But because this is a smaller indication and the development in this indication is probably faster, it could very well be that even though right now it's slightly behind in the development, it could actually be that because it's much faster, Tesomet in hypothalamic obesity could actually reach the market before Prader-Willi syndrome. We talked about our unique ion channel development. We have a product in 2 rare disease indications in mid to late stage, coupled with quite an interesting portfolio, right? So we talked about Tesomet in the 2 indications, but we also have 2 molecules that we will be developing in rare diseases. So it already will fuel once Tesomet gets to the market. SAN711, which is going into phase 1, will probably be in phase 2. So there's continuity from our research that will fuel our portfolio moving forward. So in summary, talking about the timeline, this will be a busy year for us. It will focus on some of the data. It will focus on, financing. We want to make sure that we are able to run the clinical trials. We are not going to kick off our clinical trials, which currently we're planning in Q4, before we can ensure that we have the funding, because the last thing you want to do is start a trial and then not be able to finish it. But as you can see here, we expect the hypothalamic obesity results in this first half, and then the second half, we do anticipate to kick off our Prader-Willi phase 2b/3. We are having a pre-IND meeting with the FDA with the intent to file an IND in the US in the second half, and we have to file the IND before we kick off the clinical trial. Going into next year, we intend during the first half to kick off our hypothalamic obesity phase 3 trial, and then we'll get the top-line results of our Prader-Willi phase 2b in the first half, and then in the second half, we will kick off our phase 3 trial in Prader-Willi syndrome. And then when we go into second half of 2022, that is when we will get the results for both trials. That's our proprietary development. Those are our molecules, our development, and ultimately we will commercialize it. When we talk about partnerships or strategic partnerships, which you see below in the purple, those are the partnerships, molecules that we do not intend to develop. Those are the bigger indications. So we talked about, or I think I spoke outside, Medix. Medix is one partnership where we partnered with them on tesofensine to develop tesofensine. They did a clinical trial last year. They submitted for approval in Mexico in December, and they're expecting approval around mid-year this year. Obviously, once it's approved and on the market, Saniona will start getting royalties from Medix for tesofensine. So they're starting with Mexico, and then they will follow with Argentina, which are the 2 countries that we gave them the rights for tesofensine. So they're going to start with Mexico, get the approval. Once they get the approval, they're going to pursue Mexico with the intent to launch tesofensine in Argentina next year. And for conclusion, As I said up front, we are a rare disease company in mid to late stage a clinical stage company, with our two main indications in rare eating disorders, both with a product called Tesamet. But we have a unique situation. We have not only a mid to late stage development, but we also have a unique ion channel platform that will fuel new products coming in. And those products that are not our core, are not proprietary, that we do not intend to develop, we will partner with relevant larger companies who will develop and commercialize it. And we talked about the leadership. And I'm looking at the time, so perfect timing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, why is it a concentration in Sweden of some really, I would say, fantastic Danish companies in medicine? Why do they have their business in Sweden and research in Sweden? And some of them are situated in Denmark.
Well, I think Sweden offers a variety, great science, great scientists here. I think the stock market, obviously, and the investors here in Sweden are probably a bit more advanced than they are in Denmark. Obviously, a bigger market. But also, honestly, looking forward, clearly we have to continue to work on the Swedish market. Obviously, we're listed. But I think one of the focuses for us will also be, obviously, with my hiring, the hiring of the executive leadership moving forward in the U.S., will also be to focus on institutional investors, which we will continue to focus here in Sweden, but we will also start focusing in the U.S.
So you are moving to U.S.?
So the research will remain in Copenhagen. There are about 20 people of the 24 are all research. All that will remain, all the research facilities, everything will remain in Copenhagen. But everything else we will start building, and we will build that in the Boston area.
Why?
Well, Massachusetts is probably the largest biotech hub in the world. The big investors are based on the East Coast, either New York or Boston. All our clinical trials will take place in the U.S. And the U.S. is the first market that we're going to launch. So it is important that we are there, that we interact with the stakeholders, whether they be physicians, whether they be investors, whether they be clinical trial sites, and obviously patients and patient organizations. So it's hard to do it from Scandinavia. It's much easier to do it when you are based there.
Will it be so that stakeholders will come from U.S. in some years? The main stakeholders will be in the United States and not in the Scandinavian countries.
Which stakeholders are you talking about?
Stakeholders in Saniona.
Like investors? You
Yeah.
mean? It could be. I think I've only been in the company for 2 months, but I spent most of those 2 months meeting banks and investors, and I can tell you the feedback is very good. Some of them have been following Saniona, and they feel that the story is different. They feel that it's almost like a new company, and many of them want to partner with us and work with us, and they see the company. If you take this company, if this company was in the U.S., the financial situation of this company would have been very, very different. And I think they see the opportunity. They see that the drug works. They believe the drug works. And therefore, I think they definitely want to invest. And that's what we're hoping for.
Why do you concentrate to such a rare disease as Prader-Willis symptom?
So, first of all, I've been working in rare disease space for a long time, and there are about 7,000 rare diseases known today globally, and there are about 600 treatments only available. So there's a huge...
That's very few.
Very few. There's a huge unmet medical need. And I think, number one, only when you work in the rare disease space and you treat a patient with rare diseases and you see the impact that you have on their lives...
and you feel happiness, of course.
Well, you understand why you're in the business that you're in. Many of these patients had no hope. This is not a large indication that there are many companies necessarily pursuing, and they're so grateful that somebody is pursuing it. I think it's been proven a long time ago that there were many skeptics 20 years ago that there's no business in rare diseases. And I think Genzyme was the first to prove that absolutely there's a business in rare diseases. But more importantly, if you do the right thing for patients, the business will come. And I worked for Sobi, and Sobi is a perfect example for a rare disease company that is very successful. And that's what we hope to be able to do with Saniona as well.
But how is it possible to earn money?
How is it possible to earn
Yeah.
money? Well, you have to remember these
Who are going to pay?
Who's going to pay?
Yeah.
Insurance companies are going to pay. The general model is because there are so few patients, typically the price of drugs are higher, which is acceptable, as opposed to mass market products where the prices are very low. Insurance company, I can tell you that we had no issues with insurance on any of the rare disease products that we have worked on in the past, because there is an understanding that there are so few patients. So while the price per drug per patient is high, the overall budget impact on the insurance company is actually relatively low because there are so few patients. The price is high, low number of patients, but also you have to remember this is a rare disease. So the organization that we will build once we commercialize it is usually a very small organization, because most of these patients are treated in centers of excellence. So really there are very few. You don't need a lot of sales rep. You don't need a lot of medical personnel, because these are just a few patients a few centers that treat these patients. So, the investment into launching this product is typically lower than it would be in big indications.
Will you get support from the authorities?
In what sense?
Well, I don't know.
Well, I'd say this. First of all, FDA is very supportive, and I've launched rare disease products, and when it comes to rare disease, the FDA is very open. More than they're open, they actually want to help companies develop products in rare diseases. They actually set a group called the Rare Disease Group in the FDA, and the whole goal of that group is to advise companies to develop products in rare diseases, because they understand that there aren't that many patients out there. They understand you can't do a study with 100,000 patients or 50,000 patients or even 10,000 patients when there are only 8,000 in the US. So they help advise how to run those clinical trials. And I have seen the FDA approve a drug based on a phase 2B. So they didn't even have to do, well, we didn't. We launched Gamifant in the US. We didn't have to do a phase 3. We were in discussions with the FDA. They were willing to approve a drug on the basis of 5 case studies. So it's just to say that the FDA is very supportive. So to your question, is there support? The FDA for sure is very supportive. We will have to have discussions with payers as well. But from my experience, when it comes to rare diseases, they want to help. They understand there's no alternative. So, once there's a drug approved, they typically approve it or reimburse it.
Maybe we have some questions from the public.
Yeah. So
can you summarize the question?
Oh, can I summarize the question? Yes. So the question was, in the larger indications that we do not intend to pursue ourselves, is it on the obesity? The question was specifically on general obesity. Is it standard or typical obesity patients, right? That was the question. So the answer is yes. Our partner, Medix, that we gave tesofensine to, they did the phase 3 trial of tesofensine in general obesity, to your question. And once they get the approval will be for general obesity. So it's not for rare diseases. Prescriptions, you mean? Oh,
that can generate a lot of revenue.
Yeah, so the obesity market in Mexico, as an example, is probably around $200 million market. Medics specifically have obesity clinics all around throughout Mexico, and they have about a 50% market share. So their market share is about 100 million of the 200 million market there. They have a few other obesity products, but tesofensine will most likely be their drug of choice in those clinics. So, we anticipate, even if it's 50% and we get, double-digit royalties, that would be a nice revenue stream coming into Saniona, hopefully around mid-year and onwards.
What will you do after you have sold the drug?
After we launch the drug?
Yeah.
Well, we have 2 products in early research. So SAN711, I think by then could be in phase 2. So that's why this combination of mid-late stage that will bring our current product quickly to market. The research platform will, as I said, will fuel future products coming in. The more advanced of the 2 that we currently have is SAN711. By the time we reach the market, it probably will be in phase 2. So we'll be in clinical development for our next rare disease indications.
So you will have a wonderful time.
That's the plan, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.